Good evening, friends. I am your host, K.K. Gupta here. I am a director in research in India. We are eminent speaker with us. So today topic, as per your advice, we have selected as a research in India banners, Data Protection Bill 2022 and its implications on digital lending. The major subject is digital lending. How this protection bill will have its implications. I think the subject is very wide and we will discuss thoroughly on that subject. So discussion topic what we have selected is state of origin lending ecosystem, challenging the digital lending ecosystem, proactive role of the policy and regulations, the way forward, need for a strong data privacy and client protection framework, expectation from the data protection bill 2022. You must be aware that in view of the judgment of case, Swami case in 2017, under the Article 21 of the Constitutions, Shri B.N. Shri Krishnan Committee was formed in 2017, and in his report, a bill was introduced in a parliament on December 11, 2019, and it was handed over to JPC, and who was given a report on 16 December 2021, and put so many flaws, so many amendments, other things they have introduced. So ultimately, the government withdrawn this bill on 3rd August 2022. The major aspect now, government has come out. Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology sought public comments on 18 November 22. This act is very important. This bill is very important. Once it's formed an act, the point will be what is the implications of the bill on the digital lending. I think this is a major aspect of what we are talking about. We are talking about personal data today. All personal data are available either on the internet or on the Facebook or any electronic medias. How you can protect yourselves, that is the most important issue. Personal data is any informations that relate to individuals which is identifiable for a living being. I think this is the most important issue, which data is identifiable, that will say that is a personal data. It is identifiable or unidentifiable, all data is also there. So we're going to discuss all the aspects in respect of this Data Protection Bill 2022. The market size of the digital lending in India is expected to grow at 1.5 trillion by 2030. Looking into size of that and coming to the bill, forming an act will play a very important role for that. So we are with us, eminent speakers, Shri Abhishek Mitra sir, who is CEO and Managing Director, Indian Cyber Securities Solution. Profile you have already seen. And Mr. K.V. Dipu, who is a senior president, Bajaj, Bajaj Alliance General Insurance Company, Shri Karan Kumar, General Manager, B-Mart Retail Limited, Shri Anil Pinapala, CEO and founder, Vivek Finance, and Himmat Kumar Rula, CFO, Finance Director, Subcontinent Regions. I think looking into these aspects, so first of all, I want to invite Shri Abhishek sir. Abhishek ji, what I want from you, what steps are necessary to create a solid data, privacy, and customer protection framework? So data is available. In this technological world, in this internet world, we can data how data can be protected. Bill you have already seen. So have any view on that? Whether you want something to be added or something to be deleted, or what was the necessity to create this type of bills introduced in the parliament?
Right.
Well,
Thank you.
Over to Mr. Abhishek. Thank you, Abhishek.
Thank you for inviting me out here and taking this topic, which is very much important, and it is to focus on now. The point which you mentioned is the need of this data protection bill. Okay. Now, yes, we are moving forward in the digital economy. As compared to our progress in the digital world, we are not as progressive in making rules and frameworks in protecting the personal data of individuals. So the need is high, definitely. But the actions which the government and legislations have taken to first bring in Personal Data Protection Act, then seeing some stringent rules on data localizations which is being bit removed or can be not that much stringent now with the digital data protection bill. And definitely an individual like you and me, our personal data, which are identifiable data, as you mentioned, the data that leads to identify me and identify me individually, needs to be the concern, and the protection should be there. But what kind of protection is important, and like how much responsibility do I have, or rather authority do I have, if I want to delete or want to remove that data which I have already provided to the data processor. Okay. So these kind of things which are already being there as in the GDPR of European Union data protection, right? So, but that are more stringent. This is more the baby steps right now, but definitely we are on the right directions. Some confusions which regarding to this bill for me is some of the normal terms have been bit changed or been refinedly used, which leads to some of the confusions of how a data processor or some of the critical data, how do you define a critical data and normal data, right? So these definitions are not there, but definitely these are the first steps which we are going forward to. The important thing which we look right now is, once we have this kind of protection to individual data, definitely the enterprises, the companies which are dealing with data will rather be having some compliances which will be directly influencing them to follow certain rules, right? Comparing with GDPR, it is just only clicking the cookies and allowing those cookies while you're opening any website. Okay. And compared to India, where such a vast country, everyone using or producing digital data with or without knowing that much of in-depth knowledge of how those data are being used, what rules and how these compliances once come into place, companies need to make sure that how they are using those data, how they are removing those data sanitizations and all those things, prospects and maintaining hygiene is important in the digital space. Once it's being followed, or once the company starts following it, once there is certain penalties, okay, if you are not following those, right? So then the companies will definitely follow. But once these companies following this kind of or complying to this kind of data protection bills or acts, right, or the rules, right, they need to go and do those kind of technical part of doing it, because I come from a technical background of doing patient testing for the company. So I'll rather tell how would a small and medium-sized company producing a lot of data would definitely go to a company and ask for doing a patient testing service and taking so much of cybersecurity, adding cybersecurity like tools and implementing those in the infrastructure. So this becomes complex, right? So this is one part we need to think of, how we will be, like small and medium-sized companies will be going forward with this, if they're doing it or they have some cybersecurity framework which allows them to do it. And also on the other part of the fintech companies or financial institutions lending or introducing cyber insurances for individuals and for companies, so that they can assess their risk, okay, and measuring or quantifying those risks, and then that will be like a cyber loan or cyber insurance being offered to enterprises. So this is where the future, I think, will go forward to. I'm not able to hear you. So,
yeah. Abhishek, just I want to know from you, this is what your cyber security you're asking for that. How you can interlink between this protection bill to the cyber securities? Have any view on that perspective?
Right. See, if your and my personal data need to be protected, right, these data are rather be used by the enterprises and by the companies. So there are rules and regulations, and there will be more stringent rules of how to use this data, right? So once these enterprises are using this data, there are penalties if they are not using this data in a proper way. Supposedly the company using my data gets hacked, right, and that data is being sold in the dark web. Now what rules safeguards my personal data? So that means the company is liable to give me that, or penalty will be there for that company being not following those cybersecurity norms and standards, or rather using my data in such a reluctant way, right? So this is how, where they need to see, and they need to do their penetration testing, and they need to test, they need to audit their IT infrastructure.
Okay, this data protection, data what we are talking about, data being collected by the banker, data is being collected all the even the food supplier also. Even if you want to give some order to restaurant, they are also collecting some data and passing on to some other person.
Right.
So what is the responsibility of these people to pass on data to other person? Even for a foreign country, if you cannot send the data from India to any foreign country and the government permitted for that. How you see that data to be siphoned off, or you can misuse by any person?
See, these are being misused. There is nothing right now. We are optimistic and getting something. But the point you are mentioning is how we are going to control, right? So basically, these are not being controlled right now. Now, point is, like, these are some of the data are personal data identifying me. Some of the data are not personal data. Supposedly, for example, I need a data of people aging 49 of weight of 85 kg, okay, and I need to target them. So that data is not leading to any individual or any individual person. So it's a group of people, right? So that data can be used, and that data can be sold, that data can be reused. Okay, so but if I, being Abhishek Mitra, being identified and my entire personal data is being sold, that is something where I need to have that protection, where I need to see that who are using it, and if I want that to be deleted, that should be deleted. If not, that there are penalties that the company need to pay.
That means identifiable data
Right.
should have a protections.
Right. Identifying data which is leading to any individual, definitely it's need to be protected.
Otherwise, general data, there's no need for any protection because you are not
General data being used by companies to make better, like for example, if I want to serve you at your location, and if I'm Zomato or any food delivery company, I need to know in your location what are the foods that are being frequently ordered, right? So in Gujarat, I cannot sell chicken, right? I know that it's not being available out there, nobody will buy that. But yes, definitely, if I sell some dhoklas and other things, that will be sellable. So that data is not leading to any individual, but I've collected it, and that is something which can be used for the business purpose.
How it will be impacted, sir, for data by bill? If we introduce the bill, how will be impacted on other people also?
See, as of now, we are taking baby steps, but definitely if we compare with GDPR, they are getting protected, right? So now what we think is definitely if we have that rights and privileges and we have rules, norms, then definitely we can protect that. Now, depending on, like previously when it was personal data protection, people told that it is too stringent, people will not be able to do so. There's no kind of that so much of control will not be good for us. Now, this is something which is much more liberal, and it's open, and it's giving some formal guidelines to go forward, right? And now people are telling it's too loose, people can misuse it, it's not defining in clearly, there is no clear definition of it. Okay, so see, as we are moving towards more digitalization, we are taking good steps. We will be reaching out to some places, but definitely it's subjected to reviews and other things which the government is doing. Positively, they are doing it. But yes, the rate of which need to be much more higher, because in India, we are moved ahead using technology. So protections need to be much more faster. But again, on the other hand, contradictory is we have so many large population in India, so, and there are so many enterprises working here, right? So we need to keep in mind, have an open mind, and ask people for reviews, and then we can formulate some guidelines which will help us to have a more better protective way, where individual like you and me and other people get their personal data are protected.
That means what you're thinking, that this protection bill will be useful.
Yes, definitely. We don't have anything right now. We were craving for it. Definitely, as a part of being in the business of cybersecurity, this is definitely going to help. As an individual person, you and me, if I think, yes, definitely, because I have something to tell that, see, I'm getting disturbed because you have sold this data to someone else. Now, you are liable to be sharing my mobile number to different other companies, and they are giving me different calls and spam calls and these things. So I can at least sue you or have something in my court to play around.
Very nice, Abhishek. I appreciate. I think what actually I want from you, and you rightly spelled out very clearly. This act will be, this or bill, you can say, it has not been done. The bill will be very useful for the individual person who is identifiable data are available in the market. I think there can be benefited for that scheme.
Right.
So I'm coming to Mr. Deepu sir, who is Senior President, Bajaj Alliance General Insurance Company. So, sir, what I want from you, sir. So, what are the implications of the Data Protection Bill 2022, and what impact is expected to have? So, I just asked Mr. Abhishek also, how it is impacted. You also expert in this field also, sir. Deepu sir, have any views for that, sir?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Good afternoon, everybody. And, once again, wish you all a very happy new year. Today, we all have been consumers of data, and we keep, hearing and talking about data, right? You've seen a lot of cliches, data is the new oil, data is the new gold. We've been hearing a lot. So it obviously goes to show that, data monetization, data protection, is clearly the flavor of the season. So from that point of view, a data protection bill is certainly, a step in the right direction. I think the bill broadly aims to, bring in two objectives. One is to ensure that citizens are protected, because they are giving away data all the time. So how do we ensure that citizens are protected? At the same time, from a state's perspective, at times, keeping security in mind, how do we ensure that we use this data, in the right and legally lawful manner? So I think these are two objectives. We've had multiple versions of the bill shared earlier, and right now, we seek it in the current version, which is out there in the public domain for inputs. Now, coming to implications, Mr. Gupta, I think the conversation between you and Abhishek, laid out the landscape pretty well. So, rather than repeat, what some of the points which Abhishek clearly articulated, just bring in maybe a few other dimensions. I think one thing we should look at is, what are the principles, which are inspiring this bill. So there are a few principles, which have been kept in mind. One is about transparency. We clearly need to have, purpose, right? Purpose limitation, is one of the cornerstones of this data protection bill. How do we ensure that, we are transparent about the purpose, for which the data is being collected? Second is data minimization. How can we infer, the maximum from the minimum? How do we ensure that, from a consumer perspective, with minimal data, we're able to, go about fulfilling their needs? Third is accuracy. That's very, very important as well, and how do we ensure that, we keep it up to date? Fourth is storage. This is typically an area where, we've seen a lot of incidents, happening, across various industries, right? So from a storage limitation perspective, how do we ensure that, the data is up to date? And the fifth is, of course, in terms of reasonable safeguards, right? We need to have safeguards in terms of ensuring that there are no breaches, there is no unauthorized, collection, so on and so forth. So hopefully, if all these principles, come into play, it will lead to a win-win for all the stakeholders involved. And, that's how I see the, the landscape coming, playing out. Now, coming to implications, Mr. Gupta, the very pointed query that you asked. I think from a, from an industry perspective, and let's say if you look at my industry, insurance, or if you look at even the larger implications of BFSI, we need to ensure that at all points, when we are interacting with customers and with, various data points across the entire journey, we clearly keep these principles in mind. We become extremely transparent. So, for example, move from implicit consent to explicit consent, so that it's very clear. Secondly, in terms of backend, infrastructure, we are very clear in terms of, how do we store the data? How do we ensure that, we invest in top-notch cybersecurity mechanisms, so that there are no breaches? And most importantly, the trust that consumers have in us, because when they share data, they're sharing a significant part of their personality. How do we ensure that, we keep it, we keep that trust paramount? So it calls for dialogue with stakeholders and customers, and it calls for, good investments, in data security across the entire spectrum. So that's broadly, how I view the bill as well as, the implications for the industry. You're on mute, Mr. Gupta. We can't hear you.
There is some throat problem. So, Dipu sir, you have mentioned by the 5 principles. What you are talking about the transparency, they still are there. So, how you feel that this act can be helpful to have a more transparent?
Yeah.
Transparency already there. What your safety is there, minimize is there. What you're talking about the accuracy, everything is available. The system. Why the bill is necessary for this?
It's a good question, Mr. Gupta, because sometimes, when we look at data protection bills or when we talk about discussions on data, it appears like, old wine in a new bottle. The reason is, twofold. One is, typically, we see across the spectrum, people who try to game the system. So that's why, for example, I made that point about moving from implicit consent to explicit consent. Sometimes, you will find situations where, the consumer is later on told, that you did not opt out. By default, we opted you in. Whereas, if you move towards explicit consent, clearly make it to the customer right upfront and say, this is, there, and do we have an explicit consent? The customer is made aware. That is the extent, to which you are transparent, rather than, getting into wink management, and that makes it very clear to the customer. The second aspect is also about execution. If you look at, any data protection bill, at the end of the day, the principles are evergreen. Transparency, accuracy, minimization, storage limitation, reasonable safeguards. These are all evergreen principles, right? I mean, it's not as if, when you see these principles, you're hearing of them for the first time. But why this becomes a recurring theme is because it's when it comes to execution, that we need to have, bring in absolute rigor. We need to ensure that everybody is aware, because we all know, for example, that very often, you do not have direct dealings, between the customer and the firm. Very often, you'll have a huge, chain in between, right? Because there is a distribution chain, there is a supply chain. So how do we ensure that at every step of the way, everybody, is fully transparent, and, therefore ensures, especially in financial services, there is no mis-selling. The customer is clearly told about it. The language is simple, in terms of what is included, what is excluded, so that when the customer comes to you for servicing post-purchase, he clearly finds out, that there is no dissonance, or there is no, or there is no difference of opinion. So that's where I think, this whole, angle of bringing these principles to the fore and ensuring, that everybody across the system is brought in and bought in, is so very important.
Very important, very important, which I desire from you, because the education part is the most important issue for a protection of any personal data. I think this act can be this bill, I will say act, this bill will be very useful.
Right.
Sir, now you are dealing with the insurance. I think Bajaj is very known in the country. So, have any impact on your insurance, or any opportunity for the insurance company after coming this bill? What do you feel as your insurance head of that Bajaj Alliance?
Yeah. So, Mr. Gupta, as I said, the insurance industry, or any industry for that matter, will always gain from, having a very clear, and transparent, landscape. One is, with the moment you have, an industry-wide standard, it ensures that everybody adheres to it. So therefore, it's, fair across the board. So that's one clear aspect. Consumers, no matter whom they deal with, because now there is a very clear legal requirement, in terms of, doing this, it ensures standardization. So which is good, because you do not want customers to sometimes, form a negative impression about the industry, because, they've had a bad experience, with one firm, right? Whereas if all firms, follow the norm, it ensures that, the industry, gains, trust, in the eyes of consumers. So that's clearly one implication. The other is, as we all said, we have, for example, you look at our own, interaction right now, right? It's happening over the web. This would not have been possible in a few years back. Everything would have been physical. So as we get into, digital interactions, we are in a world where we are not just working digitally, but living digitally. We are giving away, footprint, without even realizing it. So I think this will bring a greater awareness to everybody in the system, and when you become aware of, the kind of digital footprint you're leaving behind, it brings in, a heightened sense of awareness, which, leads to, higher security across the board. And we obviously would want our, customers to be safe, because we would want them to interact digitally, without, being in a situation, where they can have a perceived, loss of data, which can lead to, which can have, far-reaching implications. So which is, the second thing, because then everybody, will invest, across the board. The third is, because of, higher transparency, because of, higher, investment in security, there is a greater degree of trust across the board, which will obviously, lead to, eventually, leading to, the growth of the industry, right? Because sometimes, we sometimes look at it only from the point of view of, data and customer interest. But if we basically take care of core customer needs and trust goes up, then the industry will benefit, as a whole, in the long run. So I see these three, clear implications, for the industry, as we go about, getting this bill implemented, across the spectrum.
That means trust and digitalization. I think this is the most important aspect.
Right.
We are not talking about digitalization here. We are talking about the protections to the individuals.
Right.
How is it impacted on the insurance? So trust is still there. People are coming to you because they have a trust in your company. That's why they are coming for insurance or general insurance or something like that. So how the bill can be helpful for an insurance company?
See, digitization is a way of dealing with customers, right? You're basically moving your interactions from the physical world to the digital world.
I agree with you.
But
That is
but
okay.
in its wake, it brings about, a change in the way, data is procured, the way data is managed, the way
Yes.
data is stored, and the way,
Yes.
data can even be, put to rest. So that is the reason, we cannot decouple, data security from digitization. which is where when a bill comes in, it basically ensures, standardization across the board, because now it is no longer a matter of discretion, but a matter of compliance, right? And when that happens, the level of seriousness, the level of awareness, the level of investments across the board, will lead to an exponential rise in investments, in awareness and execution. So that's where, the bill can clearly help, because the standards are clear, when firms are clear, when customers are clear, when intermediaries are clear, and you have the regulator, cutting across, all of these, and our regulator has been extremely proactive, it will certainly, lead to an increase in trust. And one moment, and insurance is a matter of trust. If you look at the core definition of insurance as well, and when there is, greater degree of trust, then, it just leads to, an all-round, rise in all the positive parameters.
That means by this bill, the trust will be further strengthened. And
Yes.
I say further the individual person can be more confident that their data will not be, you can say, used somewhere else.
Yes.
Very nice, Deepu sir. I think really which we want from you.
Thank you.
Beneficial for you. I think you have covered very nicely all such things, sir. And thank you. I will come back to you, sir.
Yeah.
I'm talking to see Karan Kumar, General Manager, Gmart Retail Limited. So, sir, Mr. Kumar, what part of should be policy and regulation play in supporting digital lending? So now question is, major aspect of this webinar, virtual webinar, it is how it is impacting on digital lending. Digital lending, as we told, it is high scope up to 2030. Everybody is going for a digital lending. All the fintech companies are coming up very, very, you can say, big way. It may be threat to the banker also, or some other thing with financial institution also. So how you view as per a digital lending aspect after coming of this bill, Mr. Kumar?
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. It's quite difficult to speak after such stalwarts have spoken about the bill in such details. However, in my limited capacity and in individual capacity, I'll try to answer this. Mr. Gupta, you are absolutely right that it's quite difficult to ask that what a regulator should do, or what the policy and regulation role should play in supporting the digital lending. Everything is going fine. We have seen last year wherein in 2022, RBI has come up with regulations and there was disruption in the sector. As a risk professional, I would say one thing: better car and better racing car needs better brakes. So what happens is that when a sector is growing, it's very important that the overall ecosystem in which the sector is operating, that needs to be regulated. Let's, Mr. Gupta, you gave a very valid example that in case of before pandemic, you were not even, let's accept that we were forced upon on the digitalization. And as we speak about the growth of the sector also, the digital lending is still in an infant stage. While in case of traditional banks, and please pardon me for giving a wrong number in case a report is wrong, but nearly 2% lending is coming from the digital lending in case of banks. However, this ratio is quite high in case of NBFCs, which is close to 10%. All this ecosystem has largely been impacted when there is a regulation like the current bill has come up with. Now, how it's going to impact the overall ecosystem, it's important to understand that Supreme Court has asserted that Article 21 is the heart of the fundamental rights. You have rightly mentioned that the businesses, the banks, financial institutions, the fintech companies, everybody as a part of the ecosystem needs to respect as well as follow the law. In fact, the law has been framed and has been developed keeping in view this particular baseline only. Now, the digital lending ecosystem can only be developed, and the demand can only be furnished and can only be fulfilled when the demand opportunities are completed and met in a trusted environment. So the regulators, while drafting policies and regulations, they need to ensure that they need to create an enabling framework which makes overall digital lending more easier for business, for customers, makes it more inclusive, It fills in the gaps which already has in terms of customer data privacy and protection laws. It systematically regulates the unregulated app-based lenders. And most importantly, it maintains a full transparency in offering the products through the digital platforms. Now, through this, how the government has been able to do that is through this bill, they aim to fulfill all these four elements. While we're talking about these elements, it's important that the section 25 of the bill, I'm sure my fellow friends and all the panelists must have gone through it. We haven't seen such huge penalties in any of the laws in past, wherein if a data processor or a data fiduciary, if he is not able to exercise the reasonable security safeguards, the penalty is up to 250 crores. If basically, and of course, for the first time, a board has been nominated, and if basically the businesses are failed to notify the board, the penalty is up to running is 200 crores. Now, when the stakes are so high, the businesses can't afford to fail. Now, what's more important is that while drafting the regulations and policies, it has to be made a little easier for the businesses to adopt as well as to comply. One such regulation is, for example, in case of the new bill, the old and contentious clauses of the previous privacy bills have been revoked now, and the overall bill has been made very simplified. However, there are certain elements, for example, data localization, wherever the stance of the RBI is basically more stricter, as well as the stance of this bill is relatively, they both need to converge at some point of time. We are expecting that across various legislations, there is going to be a convergence. So in the times to come, we can see that the legislation environment needs to be balanced. It needs to foster innovation for the fintech companies and application owners. And the most importantly, it needs to withhold the data security, privacy, secrecy, and customer protection. Over to you, Mr. Gupta.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Kumar. What you are talking about the penalty clause, I think this is the most important aspect. Plenty, they have put very huge penalty for that. My point is only for digital lending. So why coming this act? So confidentiality have to be maintained, or you can say personal data to be preserved. And after adjustment of some time, if the loan has been adjusted by the NBFC or by the bank, that should be scrapped also. That also. How will be impacted for on the digital lending, sir? So digital lending is the most important aspect for that, which we are asking from you. How it will be digital lending? Whether digital lending will be increased with this act or this bill, or it will be reduced for that, or any further precaution banker or NBFC or any financial institutions should be given. Even fintech company can take over this issue. Have any view on that, Mr. Kumar?
Mr. Gupta, absolutely right. I think the most important part is how we are generating the information and where we are generating the information, what information we are generating. There are three important elements to it. Mr. Deepu has already touched upon on these elements, but allow me to rephrase on that. As a data fiduciary, the banks and financial institutions, as well as the fintech companies, and for digital lending perspective, the lot of personal data is going to be asked from the customers from the point of view of either the assessment for the credit worthiness or in fact from the loan eligibility point of view. They need to ensure that they have adopted reasonable security measures. Now, what is reasonable security measures? That needs to be explicitly defined. Is it an ISO 27001 certification? Is it a risk certification? Is it the bank grade security mechanism that the RBI has suggested to adopt, has asked the banks to adopt? That needs to be made more clearly to adopt that. Second thing is for the fintech companies and for the lenders, from risk point of view, it's very important that who has access to that information. It's very important that access management control over the information management system of the fintech companies and banks, that needs to be very cautiously monitored, especially by the risk officers of the banks, so that any and of the operations heads of the banks also, and the fintech companies also, and to everybody to whosoever is there in the ecosystem, so that any unrestricted, any unauthorized, any unlawful such accesses can be avoided. Now we are living in a world wherein cyber attacks are increasing. The responsibility in terms of collecting the information responsibly also lies on the person who's asking that information. Now, from various points of views, a person cannot store this data for eternity. So I think the expectations and the service rules would come along with in the times to come, which will speak about for what period is going to be regulated and what is the reasonable period for which it's going to be stored. But I think in a normal parlance, till the time of financial information, and I think we need to draw on the existing legislations to answer that, till the time the rules are more notified and the detailed rules are notified.
Very nice, very nice. So I will, there is one point, Mr. Kumar, what I'm feeling it, education is most important aspect. Even to give a digital lending, people should be educated. What initiative should be taken by the, you can say by the bill, where people can be educated for these aspects so they can go for digital lending? Have any view on that respect, sir?
Sir, allow me to answer this question from a retail point of view.
Yes, that's why I'm asking you, because for a DMart aspect. So please give your view for that.
So I think from as a retailer, and what we have been able to see that is that the growth of India is coming from the growth of Bharat. The tier 2, 3, and 4 cities of India, they have been the future of the growth of the country. Now, for over generation and decades, the development of these sectors, these areas, and these locations have not been very uniform. It's very, very important that lately what we have seen is either through Jan Dhan or through other government programs, there has been an increase in financial inclusion, but a similar degree of efforts is required to disseminate the information at the grassroots level. While the Honorable Supreme Court has declared that privacy is a fundamental right, but in spirit as well as in terms of awareness, is it even being made available to the common people? I think that's where it needs to be done. As a regulator, we need to rely upon an integrated communication strategy, not only from digital point of view. See, we can't have the digital literacy through digital means only. It has to be inclusive, wherein we need to talk about it, make it as a way of working, and it has to be a shared responsibility. If we expect only regulators to do that, I think it won't be very fair. But from a regulatory point of view, I think the board has got a lot of role to play in that. But I would say, Gupta ji, that industry associations are going to have a very vast role to play in this, especially by conducting sessions like this, by disseminating the information in a larger forum. The knowledge as well as the digital literacy will finally go into the right places at right channels.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar. I think that was a proper answer, which you have spelled out, because education is more important. Even we are talking about the rural area where you can say tired city like B or C or D. So some education should be required. Why, you can say, why having this type of webinar or something like that, that education can be important so that a lending space can be increased. Now I'm coming to Sri Anil Pipapala, who is CEO and founder of Vivex Finance. Sir, you are the main person for the financial under the NBFC and also a fintech company. What role can a digital lending play in improving financial inclusion and empowerments? Because the NBFCs are playing very, very important role for the financial inclusion by coming to co-lending by the NBFC. Even the fintech company are playing very, very important role to bridge the gap. So, Sir, Mr. Anil, have any thought on that subject, Mr. Anil?
Thank you, Gupta ji, for having me on this panel and Resurgent India, and thanks to all the fellow panel members who have shared a lot of great insights. Coming to digital lending's role in improving financial inclusion, As you rightly pointed out, digital lending is supposed to grow manifold by 2030. It is supposed to touch as much as $1.5 trillion. And a lot of this growth will come by addressing new market segments, new consumer segments, not what the banks and the traditional NBFCs have largely addressed previously. If you look at Indian credit market, the credit to GDP ratio of India is still about 15%, as against developed markets like US, which is nearly, consumer credit itself is about 80% of the GDP, and the overall credit is over 100%. So there is a huge potential, there is a huge gap. And credit, especially consumption-driven credit, always drives up the growth of an economy. So retail consumption credit is going to be a big driver for our economy's growth in our objective to be a $5 trillion economy, as our Prime Minister has always pointed out. But if you look at Indian credit system today, it is very limited. For the top 100 million people, there is a lot of credit available. All of us get loan offers day in and day out. But the large cross-section of working India has been kept out of access to credit. If you look at India as a whole, today there are about 55 million people with a credit card. In a country of 1 billion people, only 5% of the country has a credit card. That number was 30 million maybe 7 years ago. In fact, a lot of growth within credit card has happened within the last 7 years. But even after the tremendous growth, it is only 5.55 million people who have a credit card. Overall, there are people with a credit file in India who have a credit record with one of the credit bureaus is now about 200 million. But more than 100 million of them have a very thin line, which means they will have one credit inquiry or one credit record in their file. So it's only the top 100 million that have had access to credit from the banks and the traditional NBFCs. And that's where the digital lenders are stepping in. Because if you are offering just a new means of getting a loan, instead of walking into a branch or a DSA coming to your home and applying for a loan, you are giving them the convenience of applying on a mobile phone, that's not going to expand the market. And once more, if you are a fintech or a digital lender like us, if you start that as your strategy, the banks are always going to catch up. So we as a company have focused on the underserved and the unserved. If you look at our customer segment, more than 2/3 of our customers have an income less than 30,000 rupees. More than half of our customers have an income less than 20,000 rupees. If you look at any bank or a traditional NBFC, their cutoff is if you don't make income below, if you don't make 30,000 rupees, they'll not even touch you. If you don't have 3 years of employment, they'll not touch you. If you if you don't have a credit score about 700, they'll not touch you. So a large cross-section of India has been left out of access to credit. And companies like us, our peer group, we have all focused on bringing access to the underserved and unserved, and also access in terms of consumption-driven credit. If you look at India, we had a great revolution, especially in the early 2000s with microfinance. But microfinance is mainly productivity-driven credit only in a group lending concept. Somehow, credit as a concept in India, when it is consumption, has been looked up. But if you look at post-Vietnam US, the growth of US economy happened on back of consumption-driven credit, which was driven by credit card. So India, we need to offer credit card-like products that increase the discretionary income of the consumer and be able to give it to the next 400 million people, not the top 100 million people. And that's where I think the digital lenders are playing a role. If you look at smartphone penetration in India, it's almost 800 million people now. See, more than 600 million with a smartphone. And and we are using that as the means to reach out to the consumer, use innovative ways which are beyond what a bank or a traditional NBFC would use for underwriting, and be able to underwrite these customers and give them credit, and give them credit quickly, and give them credit in places where they can use. It should be based on the rails of UPI. Everybody knows how to do a UPI transaction. That's why we are trying to mimic a UPI type transaction for our consumers so that they will be able to walk into any merchant location and pay with credit. So it's not just about providing them access, but also providing them the distribution and making sure that the customers have ability to use the credit. And us as a player and our peer group as an industry association, we believe that the next 300 million to 400 million people is where the growth will come from. And that's what we are all focused on.
Financial inclusion, I think you are playing very important role. What you talked about the income is 30,000 still or below that, you are considering them the lending. I think you are playing very important role under the micro development of the country, which people are not getting any loan from the banks even, from the NBFC. I think your fintech company and your NBFC are playing very important role. What you're talking about the GDP to credit, I think there is a lot of scope. I think this is the first time I'm hearing you are comparing GDP to the credit. I think this is the order of the day. So a lot of scopes are there in India to have a credit. So to achieve the 5 trillion economy, you're also mentioning something for that. I think this is the major aspect. So sir, what do you want from you as a NBFC or as a fintech company? Do you feel that by this bill coming to bill will have more responsibility with you?
Yes, sir, I think the bill is a great initiative for the overall digital economy itself. But if you look at digital lendings per se, I think Karan already referred to it. The bigger impact has been the digital lending rules that the RBI published last year, which went into effect in November. And they have clearly laid out a framework wherein privacy, transparency in disclosures, and standardization in disclosures have been a key focus of RBI. And it has been a welcome move, one which made sure that if you are a digital lender or any kind of lender, you need to have a certain level of maturity. You need to be very clear about what you are seeking. And Deepuji already talked about explicit consent. That is a proposal in the bill that you are talking about in data protection, but in digital lending, it's already been implemented. Every consent has to be explicit. Every disclosure has to be standard. And all of this information has to be clearly displayed to the consumer. And we need to have explicit consent, both in terms of getting the data, but also in terms of making sure that they understand the terms and conditions of the loan that is being offered. So while this bill will have a larger impact on the overall digital economy of India, I think the lending and the digital lending specifically is already being held to a higher standard. For us, the compliance is almost, for most of the provisions of the bill, are already mandatory for us. And if you look at the consent layer, which we call the Sahmati, which is account aggregator framework that has been prescribed, what it does is it puts one of the most important thing that the bill does is it puts the ownership of the data in the hands of the rightful owner. It is the consumer who is the owner of the data. It is not the company which is the owner of the data. And as long as we keep that in our mind and respect the consumer's right to his own data and the consumer's right in choosing how a company can use that data to offer the services. None of the bills is saying that you cannot use the data. It is, you need to make sure that the customer understands what is the data being given, that they clearly agree to you using the data in a particular fashion. As long as you lay that out, any company can use the data in a format in which they can provide better services to the consumer. But it all has to be clearly disclosed. So I think it is very important for the overall economy. For us, I think we are already held to a higher standard with the Sahmati, the digital lending rules. And while there are some areas of impact which are slightly beyond, but where we'll have to build some compliance. But I think I think the digital lending space overall will be one of the first and the most easiest to adapt to this new framework.
Very, very nice, Anil. What you have mentioned, consumer is the owner of the data. I think this aspect is should be well taken. So, as a fintech company, do you feel that it is an intermediary between the banks and the borrower, or it can be a threat to the bankers? What do you feel as a fintech company? Because they are helping for a digital lending very high pay. Whether you consider them as an intermediary?
See, I mean, I think, Gupta ji, today every lender is a digital lender. If you look at a bank, I think HDFC, whether they explicitly say it or not, probably is one of the largest digital lenders in India because a lot of people are digital native. Especially if you look at customers who are below 25 years or below 30 years old, they don't even think that they should walk into a branch. That concept itself is very alien to them.
Yeah, right.
If you are ordering food on the phone, if you are buying your cell phone on the phone, why are you? They don't think I should go to a bank to apply for a loan. They think it's their right to apply for a loan sitting at their home on their phone or at their office.
Hey, I'm just asking what is the future of the fintech company. I'm just not asking anything else. Whether it will not be a threat to the banks.
I mean, see, it has started out as a threat to the banker, but the banks are catching up. And that's where I think fintech companies, if you're just trying to be a digital storefront, will not work. It is product innovation. It is attracting customers whom the banks are not targeting. Because once the banks offer that medium, it is very easy for bank to keep that customer because they already have that customer.
Yeah,
So, I mean, there is also a very healthy cooperation that is going on between fintechs and banks. A lot of banks are partnering with fintech companies in offering innovative products as well as reaching out to the consumers. So there are both aspects. And I think over a period of time, this is all going to converge. And I believe that every lender is and will be a digital lender in the future. And the only differentiator is how you deliver the service, what you are trying to keep your consumer with you, and the innovation in products, giving flexibility to the consumer, giving credit card like credit to the consumer. Those will be the differentiators, and not let a credit card be the domain of the top 5% of the country.
very nice, Anil. I think excellent. What you talk about, I think it is out of the day, and the digital lending is going to be seen in a big way. Now I'm coming to Mr. Hemant Kumar Ola. He's CFO, Finance Director, Subcontinent Regions. Sir Hemant Kumar, sir. So what I am asking you, what are the latest trends and innovations in Indian digital lending ecosystem? So, Mr. Hemant.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta, and happy to be on part of this panel of Resurgent India. Indeed, very grateful. I think the trends, as Anil mentioned, will be trying to serve the underserved and the unserved, if you may. Okay, and it's broadly technology led. So even if you see today also, people like Anil and the rest of the folks, they're using AI chatbots, they're using cloud, they're using all this to, and what is this helping in? It's helping in faster decisions, accurate data. It's obviously cutting down on a lot of FTEs, so it's increasing their profits. The services are getting enhanced, the faster service. By being on the cloud, the data is accessible to everyone. And more importantly, I think everyone is getting a personalized offer. Okay, which is more relevant to the person. Now, the problem which banks do not, even today, I mean, they are catching up. It's not that they are still ostriches, but by and large, they still are, because otherwise they would have caught up. Now, they are not lending, as I think Karun Kumarji said that, they're not wanting to lend to anyone who's not giving them, let's say, a 30,000 rupee profit, at least. I mean, I'm not interested. We have seen time and again that anyways, the guys to whom the banks lend, either personally or to corporates, they are anyways large. If not X bank, Y bank will give it to them. But the economy, while the economy or the GDP of the country is sustained by these people, the incremental and disproportionate growth will come from people lower down the strata, because that's the bottom of the pyramid, but huge in number. The ripple effect of those, the priming of the economy by those people will be huge. And that's where the banks do not go. But that is where the need is. And that is where the fintechs are, trying to bridge the gap. They've just started. The good news is they've started. There's a long way to go. Hopefully, by that time, the banks will catch up. And the other piece, the other benefit which I see of this is a lot of the banks, the vidambana jise kehte hain, is that banks have this huge process of, looking at credit rating, this rating, that rating. Despite that, lakhs of crores of rupees go into bad debts. Okay. Now, that I think once over a period of time, when the fintechs force the banks to catch up, these technologies that the fintechs apply, if the banks start applying, their ability to judge a lender or a lendee actually will be far more, and there hopefully the banks won't have to write off so many debts. Hence, the economy and the GDP of the country will increase disproportionately, because just by the fact that lakhs and crores of rupees won't have to be written off. You won't need public sector banks to be recapitalized. I mean, that's drain of the taxpayers' money, right? Someone is paying, the normal taxpayer is paying for someone who's run away with the money. Correct. And what the fintechs will obviously do is to go ahead and get into more and more of the unserved and the underserved, because that is what will force the banks to, the more the fintechs become bigger, the more the banks will have to follow, because otherwise, I mean, if you'll ask me, I've not seen my branch in the last decade. I've never visited my branch. I don't know how it looks. I'm serious.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know how it looks. Actually, it's last I visited was in 2006. So it's been actually 16 years that I've not visited my branch. So, and I don't care whether they exist or not. I mean, honestly. So the banks have a lot of catching up to do. And by that time, hopefully, the fintechs will drive the growth engine and the $5 trillion economy that the Prime Minister is promising far faster than what has been promised.
Sir, fintech is playing very important role, as you also said like that. So for monitoring, for credit appraisal, everything, I think the system has already developed for that. Sir, have any challenge for that? You feel that the digital lending have any challenges?
See, digital lending, one big challenge that is there is, as I think Anilji mentioned, the data that is available to mine and to make a decision is available only for so much, which means the fintechs will have to bring in a lot of big data, which itself is a challenge, because you will have to bring in big data to take a decision, because the standard credit ratings and the background data on such people will not be there, the unserved and the underserved, okay, in a proper format, which can be used to mine. So there'll be a lot of big data that has to be generated, mined actually. The data is already there. It has to be mined to take a decision on the lending. So that I think is the biggest challenge as to how to come to a conclusion, which is better than and faster than what a typical bank would do.
Data processing is important aspect in your views. That is a major thing which you have to consider. Thank you, sir, very much. Though I am coming to Shri Abhishek. Abhishek, sir, have because more than 650 registration with us and people are listening to you beside the YouTube and Facebook also. So lastly, have any suggestion from your side to your listener, to your participant? Have any view, any one or two lines, any suggestion from your side? Abhishek.
From my end, if you want me to put my views on the part of the bill, it's a positive thing which we are moving forward, and this will help us to move towards building a good economy. Prospects of the part of lending industries out here in India, definitely the cyber insurance will be a good product. And will be helping the companies to lend people, individuals, as well as companies. But yes, how do you, because if you want to lend me, I have a CIBIL score, right? But if you don't want to lend a company on a cyber insurance, okay, you don't have anything to measure on, quantify on. So that's the thing. So definitely products which can quantify the risk and help the companies to assess on which they can give this loan, or they can get their digital assets insured. That will be helpful.
Very nice, very nice. Mr. Karan Kumar, have any views? Last word from your side?
So very quickly, I would just say, keeping the things simple. The regulation has to be simple, as well as the implementation has to be simple. Because ultimately what we are dealing with is, even if the law is very good, very beautifully drafted, if it's not implemented properly at the ground, it won't get implemented. Over to you, sir.
Only execution is important for you.
Right, sir.
So, Mr. Anil sir.
I think the bill puts back customer at the center and ownership in owning their own data. It's a great move. The companies, hopefully, as Karan just said, if it's implemented well, we should all get lesser phone calls offering us extra loans and insurance that we don't need. Because obviously there is no respect for data privacy in India. And that culture needs to change, and hopefully this bill will bring that change in culture.
Very nice. Mr. Deepu sir is there. Deepu is there. Deepu sir. And Mr. Hemant Kumar is there, available. So, Hemant sir, have any lastly view, anything you want to say? Mr. Hemant?
No, I'm good, Gupta ji.
Okay, thank you very much. At the end, I think there was a very fruitful discussion. The eminent speakers were of the opinion that bill will be proved to be very useful for the individual, for the company, for the growth of the country. Whether you're talking about the digital lending or the growth, it is very useful for that. So because we are running a company where we are a merchant banker as a research in India, and we are also investment banker. We are giving knowledge, imparting knowledge through a webinars, and we give training to the bankers and to the PSUs also in that respect. So Research in India also conducting a technical viability study for the banks to respect of where they are lending more than 50 crore rupees. Besides, we also in insolvency also for that. So at the end, I'm thankful to Shri Abhishek sir, Shri Deepu sir, Shri Karan Kumar sir, Shri Anil sir, and Hemant Kumar sir, who has given their very frank and free opinion and shared their experience very well. I think by the listener, by the members who was listening to us and their participations, I think people, as per feedback I'm getting, they are giving a good, the informative, a message informative these webinars, and they are telling such webinars should also be held at a periodical intervals. So we will try to come up with expectation of our members, all the bankers, all the entrepreneurs who are always obliging us by attending this webinars for that. I'm also at the end, I'm also thankful to the my off-screen who is organizing such workshop. Either we talk about our Lokesh, who is a technical expert onto the field, and we are talking about Joginder, we are talking about Rohan, and we are talking about Mr. Chaudhary, who is the main architect of this. We are only giving our views in respect of our different webinars. Major respect is of the Supreme, who is managing this show very well, who is helping us, and we are doing mostly every week webinars. So we are also holding a webinar under the banner of the Association for Financial Advisor on Saturday. This Saturday, the very important topic, what are the expectations from the budget? Where we have called the eminent speakers, like the ex-ED of the bank, most of the chartered accountant, past president, Mr. Amrjeet Chopra will also be there, and all other eminent speakers will be there, where the rating agency person will also be there, how they are looking for the budget, coming budget, what is their expectation for that. I request all the participants, they can also attend, they can also register themselves. And with this word, I close this session with my gratitude on behalf of the Research in India and on my personal behalf. Thank you very much, all the eminent speakers for that. Thank you very much. I'm really obliged to it.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Guptaji.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.